an internet connection to play. No Wi-Fi, no worries. Our days are not getting any less stressful, and I can honestly say I still rely on Best Fiends from time to time to break through the monotony and boredom. It's a unique and exciting puzzle game unlike others out there. Best Fiends updates the game monthly so it never gets old. They really treat the game like a service for their players. Best Fiends has thousands of levels already, with new levels, events, and characters added every month. It's hours of fun right at your fingertips, and you can even play offline. With over 100 million downloads and tons of 5-star reviews, Best Fiends is a must-play. Download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends. The following month, after he was already in custody, Evan told a transporting officer further details of the crime on 2 separate occasions, including statements like he was not innocent and deserved to do some time. He also mentioned that it didn't surprise him that obvious signs of trauma were present at Cole Cannon's autopsy, then admitted to beating him badly. At the initial autopsy, the coroner didn't see signs of a crime and determined that the cause of death was smoke and soot inhalation. After Evan and Colby were apprehended and further examination of the crime scene took place, Cole's body was exhumed. The coroner then noted a forehead contusion and that hemorrhaging from blunt force trauma had broken ribs and contributed to his death, as did alcohol toxicity. He was intoxicated enough that he was unable to save himself from the assault and from the smoke and fire. Evan was held at Tennessee Valley Detention Center as he awaited trial, during which it is reported that he was largely compliant. It was noted, however, that he would have emotional outbursts, usually centered around visits or correspondence with his parents. His dad once sent a letter that called him a disappointment and disgrace. His mother often appeared for visits under the influence of drugs or alcohol, situations that would throw him into emotional chaos. She once attempted to hide Xanax inside the facility because she forgot she had it on her, and on another occasion turned cartwheels in the parking lot in a dress with nothing underneath. Trial did not begin for 3 years, and Evan's accomplice Colby Smith testified against him, taking a plea and receiving a life with parole sentence after pleading guilty to felony murder. Evan's defense attempted to establish that decreased culpability due to age and a less-than-ideal childhood were the catalyst for this murder, and Evan had pleaded not guilty by reason of mental defect. He had been subjected to sustained neglect and abuse by the age of 10, and further chaos after returning to his mother's and then his father's care following his time with the foster family. He'd spent time under psychological evaluation due to his suicidality and had several soft diagnoses such as conduct disorder, antisocial personality disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, substance abuse issues, and oppositional defiant disorder. Evan also showed signs of factitious disorder and neurological malingering, however, implying that the seriousness or very existence of some or all of these disorders could be false. The jury put the brutality of the crime above the mitigating circumstances they learned about throughout the defense's case, and Evan James Miller, then 17, was found guilty of capital murder on October 20th, 2006. The capital murder charge carried a mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole. Evan wasn't eligible for the death penalty since he committed his crime as a juvenile. Roper v. Simmons had only been decided in the Supreme Court 1 year before. Mandatory sentencing stipulations exempted defendants of the penalty phase, where mitigating factors such as age and childhood environment could affect the sentence are stressed. Under Alabama's capital punishment law, there were only 2 choices of sentence for a capital murder conviction: death for non-juveniles only, and life without parole for everyone else. Following his sentencing, Evan's older sister said, "I feel that they deserve punishment for what they did, but neither of them had an adult mind. They're victims of the system, but that is not an excuse for what they did. But I don't feel that Evan should have been tried as an adult. There are a lot of people responsible for a 14-year-old committing murder. I really believe that my mother and father should share the blame. Not just for that one night without supervision. It started when he was born. He wasn't thinking. No one had taught him to think. We were not taught respect and honesty. My daddy will say he tried to do those things, but you don't beat a child into being honest. My mother loves her children, but she's a poor parent. I feel that Cole's daughter had every right to say what she said. The whole family is justified in their pain and anger. They've waited 3.5 years. It was very heartbreaking to hear what she said, but they had the right. I feel pain for them, and I also carry the shame and guilt that my little brother is carrying. I pray that they will find closure to this and that they will go on. I'm glad that they were able to face it today. I hope they will find it in their hearts to forgive Evan. I really can't find all the words that I want to say to them." Evan Miller's sentence was reaffirmed by the Alabama Supreme Court, and attorneys from the Equal Justice Initiative would ultimately take on his case, along with the case of Kuntrell Jackson. Jackson v. Hobbs was also argued on March 20th, 2012, in front of the Supreme Court of the United States. Kuntrell Jackson had just turned 14 years old when he, his 16-year-old cousin Travis Booker, and their 16-year-old friend Derek Shields were out on the evening of November 18, 1999. As they walked, robbing a video store was discussed, and Kuntrell only then became aware that Derek had a sawed-off .410 gauge shotgun obscured up the sleeve of his coat. When the boys got to the Movie Magic video store, Kuntrell stayed outside as the others went in to rob it. The clerk, 28-year-old Lori Troop, reportedly told them that she didn't have any money over the course of several minutes. Kuntrell eventually wandered in, and what happened next became a bone of contention in his case. He was inside when Lori again said she had no money to give them, and when she said she was going to call the police, at which point Derek turned the shotgun on her, killing her with a blast to the face. They obtained no money in the robbery. Kuntrell would later brag about his involvement in Lori's murder to friends. When interviewed by police, his cousin had stated that upon entering the video store while the robbery was in motion, Kuntrell had said in the direction of Lori, quote, "We ain't playing." But at trial, both boys testified that Kuntrell had actually said, quote, "I thought y'all was playing." The argument to the justices was that the jury, believing he really said "we ain't playing," proved he showed the, quote, "reckless indifference to life" that would need to be present in order to be found guilty. The difference in statements represented the difference between whether Kuntrell was merely a bystander or if he aided the crimes in any way. Arkansas did not require that specific intent to kill be present in Kuntrell's case, as Alabama would in Evan Miller's. Kuntrell O'Brien Jackson was convicted of capital murder, which came with a mandatory sentencing requirement of life without parole, just as it soon would for Evan Miller. Then his appeal at the state level was denied and his sentence reaffirmed, making his case prime for elevation to the highest court in the nation. Miller v. Alabama argued that such mandatory sentences violated the Eighth Amendment rights of the juvenile, based heavily on the science and guidelines the justices had previously established in Roper v. Simmons in 2005. They argued that diminished culpability and heightened capacity for change must be factored before sentencing a child to die in prison.
We're not arguing that life without parole is disproportionate to the crime of aggravated murder. We are arguing that the status of children, with all of the deficits that childhood status creates, makes that kind of judgment cruel.
Jackson v. Hobbs maintained that jail WAP sentences for those who did not commit the murder firsthand were also unconstitutional, drawing not only from Roper v. Simmons but Graham v. Florida, 2010. This case centered on the sentence of life without parole for non-murder offenses. Jacksonville, Florida's 16-year-old Terence Graham first found himself in trouble after the attempted robbery of a restaurant that resulted in only minor injuries in 2003. After violating the terms of his probation related to that crime, his mandatory sentence was life in prison. And it was life without parole, because Florida didn't offer parole. Graham v. Florida went before the Supreme Court in November 2009, and the opinion was announced in May of 2010. Terence Graham was ultimately resentenced to 25 years and can begin seeking probation in 2026. So as we know, the Equal Justice Initiative was successful, and the decision in Miller v. Alabama set in motion the resentencings of almost 2,000 inmates across the country, 79, including Evan Miller himself, in Alabama alone. Kuntrell Jackson got his hearing, where he was able to present evidence of mitigating factors in his participation in Laurie Troop's murder, and was resentenced to 20 years in prison. He was paroled in 2017 and now devotes his time to activism for social reentry programs and criminal justice reform. Evan Miller, however, waited years for Alabama to resentence him. After the Miller v. Alabama decision, some states began retroactively applying the decision on their own, while other states made little to no movement on the issue. Louisiana was also reluctant to act on the decision, and it wasn't until the Supreme Court decided Montgomery v. Louisiana in 2016 that retroactivity of Miller v. Alabama was required. As a 17-year-old playing hooky from school in 1963 Louisiana, Henry Montgomery shot and killed East Baton Rouge Sheriff Deputy Charles Hurt. Montgomery had initially received the death penalty, however that decision was overturned and his sentence commuted to life without parole the following year after widespread community backlash. The High Court ruling in his case reiterated that juvenile offenders serving LWOP sentences were entitled to request a new hearing. Only then did Alabama enact new legislation to make a life with parole sentence in their state effectively 30 years to life, to ensure that when they began resentencing hearings, no one would be paroled before being incarcerated for at least 30 years. In June of 2017, Henry Montgomery was resentenced to life with the possibility of parole, but his subsequent 2 attempts at freedom have since been denied. He is currently 74 years old and is housed at Louisiana State Penitentiary, Angola. He has been incarcerated for 57 years. In March of 2017, Evan Miller had his hearing, 5 years after the Supreme Court ruling in his case set a nationwide precedent. Those who testified on his behalf included his mother and sister, foster mother and sister, childhood friends, case managers, as well as a prison teacher. Evan did not testify, but did, however, offer up some semblance of an apology to his victim's family, saying, quote, "Your dad, Cole Cannon, didn't deserve what happened to him. I'm sorry for this whole ordeal. I'm sorry for taking a huge part of your family. I want to be more. I want to do more than just an apology. To be truly sorry, you have to make amends. He expressed hope that the chain of pain